I had my Leica A camera with me. Then suddenly I saw a flying saucer. It had no wings, absolutely none. I took a photo and wound on the film, but it was already directly over me. Then I took a second photo, and I could see it was a flying saucer.
Ebb was devastated by what he felt was the theft of his saucer. UFO, where did you go? Will you be back? I don't know. Twinkling, twinkling, flying high, like an ashtray in the sky. Ebb would get his own back later, but in the meantime, the Germans had a flying saucer.
It actually flew and flew pretty well.
This is what the German saucer looked like. It was based on the flying saucer principle, the effect discovered by Henry Coanda, whereby the ship created an area of low pressure above it and literally sucked itself into the air. But it combined this with other new technologies, such as the helicopter and the jet engine. It was fast, versatile, and could potentially carry a heavy payload of bombs underneath. But perhaps most important in a country which had lost so many runways to Allied bombing, it could take off vertically.
These saucers worked in one sense almost like a helicopter in that they had rotating vanes. The vanes would rotate underneath the saucer and were powered by a jet, the same jet that moved the saucer forward, would be directed up to spinning these vanes to give it lift.
They were to be used as a bomber. Every machine built in those years was a war weapon. What was to be the final battle of the Third Reich?
According to Mercer, an increasingly desperate and deluded Hitler plotted to use his secret new weapons in a devastating attack on New York.
I was allowed 2 times to photograph at night. As we sat inside the car, we saw all of a sudden to the north, above the meadow, out of nowhere, a fire-red disc, about as large as a headlight.
And then what happened?
And then it suddenly disappeared. Then there was a short pause, after which, at the same place again, appeared all of a sudden a silvery white ball. Then there was another pause, and then the same ball appeared again. It flew toward us, got larger and larger, then shrunk, collapsed, and then, like magic, it was gone. And best of all, it looked like a shower of sparks.
In all, over 30 other witnesses corroborate Maya's testimony. The contacts continue at a furious pace, sometimes 2 or 3 a week. Maya claims to have had over 130 meetings. He has taken hundreds of photographs and has over 3,000 pages of notes.
For a long time, we've had an urge to contact someone who sincerely wants to be helpful in our mission. Here and there, we open such contacts with inhabitants of different worlds, but only when they have developed enough to become rational, thinking beings. Then we prepare them for the thought that they are not the only rational, thinking beings in the universe.
Britt questions Calliope, Maya's wife, whose nickname is Poppy.
Poppy, how long have you and Billy been married?
Now, 16 years.
And you were married in Greece?
Yes.
Uh-huh. What did you think when Billy first told you about these experiences?
Her English shaky, Poppy reverts to German.
Ja. Ein bisschen schwierig am Anfang gewesen. It was difficult at the beginning. Weil
Because she never knows anything about this case.
Oh, she didn't know?
No.
When did she find out?
She says Billy takes a long time that her tell her something from the UFO.
And then how did you feel about it?
beunruhigt einerseits, weil
and she was thinking why this happened all to me.
Billy shows her every time the picture that he takes, and so she was knowing about from the picture from the UFO. But she was very critical about this case and asked him some questions about all this case, and it was very difficult for Bobby.
Were there times when you had just had it up to here and you couldn't take any more?
She never was thinking to leaving this whole case, but she was crying and fighting against Billy and against the whole case.
At one point, Poppy admits, she was so fed up she burned half the photographs.
Today the feeling is other because she knows very well about the whole case and things about the Pleiadians, and this is very important for her.
Listen here.
Wow, you recorded that here?
My wife recorded this one here, and in the meantime, I've been there down where he's standing Lee with the other recorder.
You had another recorder down
Yes.
there. How high was the ship above you?
About 60 meters.
60 meters. How far would you estimate it is from here
Oh.
down there today?
I think some 300 meters.
The sounds bear no resemblance to anything Stevens has heard before. Maya gives him both tapes for analysis.
Military professors that used to be in war colleges and the like are training people like ex-Russian KGB and Spetsnaz people right here on American soil. I've seen it with my own two eyes, along with other people, other geologists. By the way, I'm still a geologist, still do geological survey work. However, I don't work for the government anymore. I took my security clearance and all my government stuff and cut it up and sent it back to the, pardon my French, SOBs. When I found out that a number of these 131 deep underground military bases are being used to subvert the Constitution of these United States and its people, I says, that is enough. I can't possibly be connected. Oh, well, Mr. Schneider, you can't quit, they said. Well, I says, yes, I can. I'm an individual, I'm going to quit, and I'm walking off the job. And he says, so I got arrested and casually told, well, you got to finish the job. And so I caved into that part, and I finished 3 weeks, and then at that time my father was dying, and I was allowed home, and I never went back for my paychecks. Don't intend to either. These people are beginning to show signs of being our utmost enemy. I'm talking about military people now engaged in training foreign troops on American soil, clearly against the Bill of Rights and the U.S. Constitution. It's why we formed a government, why our forefathers formed a government, a republic of these United States in the first place, way back 200 plus years ago. Because the drawing and quartering of soldiers, taxation without representation, law by edict, otherwise known as today's version, executive order, among other things. The very reasons that we became, in quote, free, a free republic, a free society, possibly one of the greatest nations to ever be a nation on this earth, were instilled in our founding fathers that are now so far away from the people now running our federal government structure. So I'm here today to touch upon a number of subjects. One being that these underground bases, roughly over 3 of them per state. There's now, instead of 12 prison camps, there's 39. That's almost 1 per state. They're building 2 prison camps every 7 months. They're building 2 underground military bases every year. Each one of these military bases, by the way, these underground military bases, they cost somewhere between $17 and $26 billion. They employ 1,800 to 10,000 workers each in varying grades of skill.
Union Banking Corporation was liquidated by the U.S. government, and Prescott Bush received $1.5 million for his holdings in his Nazi business, and that was the beginning of the Bush family fortune for all intents and purposes. George Bush takes his inspiration from what he learned in Skull and Bones and from the Thule Society that Hitler and Goebbels and Goring cut their teeth in, Bohemian Grove, these evil organizations that perpetrate the ugly things that these criminals are doing to this country for which they must be held accountable.
They are the most violent, dirtiest people on the face of the earth. Somewhere Americans are going to have to take their country back and start finding out who are these people. Who are these people we call our representatives, the Bushes. George Bush, the president, his father, went around the country talking about a new world order. The people who are running this country from behind the scenes do not care a thing about Americans or bloodshed anywhere.
You were both in Skull and Bones, the secret society.
And when I first came across this, I thought it was crazy. I thought it was insane until I realized that it was absolutely real. I want you to also bear in mind, ladies and gentlemen, that it was not too long ago, and it really wasn't too long ago, that if you mentioned to someone else that in a few years man would be flying through our own atmosphere, you would have been laughed at, ostracized, and probably kicked out of town. Then not long after that, when we did have aircraft and were carrying passengers flew through the air, if you had suggested to your neighbor that in a few years a man would be walking on the moon, you would have been laughed at, ridiculed, and maybe run out of town. Literally, when we put a man on the moon is when I realized that nothing is impossible. Nothing ever again can be impossible. The next most important thing that happened after they found E.B. it came a few years later. E.B. became ill, and they tried to save him. They were unsuccessful. They didn't know how to go about it. But in an attempt to save him, and also in an attempt to gain favor with this technologically superior race, they began broadcasting out into space for help. We have one of your people here who crashed in one of your ships. We're trying to save his life. He's dying. Please help us save his life. By doing that, they hoped, number one, to make contact, number two, to make friendly contact, number three, that the aliens would see us as a benevolent people trying to help one of theirs and would not attempt to destroy us or hurt us. Because we realized that their technology was so far ahead of ours that in any military confrontation of any kind, we would have had no chance whatsoever. And basically that is still true today. What should give you good feelings is that if the aliens wanted to, they could have done anything that they wished to us many, many years ago, and they have not done that. So I see that as good. Hopeful. I see it pregnant with all kinds of hope and possibilities for the future. Because we know as the human race, what we usually do to an inferior culture, if we're technologically superior, is usually not that good. So there is a great deal of hope. There's a great deal of promise in that. E.B. died in June of 1952. As of the time of E.B.'s death, we had not had any answer to the message that we had sent out into space. The movie that you saw, called E.T., is the story of E.B. They have changed some things around to make it more palatable to you. The beginning of the story, he's running around in the desert. He's lost. The government is chasing him. In the real story, the government caught him.
We have developed anti-gravity. I was recruited way after they got it for the first time because I came up with a method of powering a saucer craft using an ionized air plasma, which I'll explain to you later. In that program, under Dr. Teller, I was sent down to Australia. And so I have been privy to things you would never see. You would never, ever see. And I'm going to show you some of those things as best I can recreate them today, so that you'll understand that mankind has, on his own accord, done some of this. Now, before the alien card was played or begun in 1947, it was kicked around in Washington that in addition to removing the noise level, after World War II was over, there was going to have to be some sort of a plan devised to stop warfare. We could not afford, the human race could not afford another warfare with the technology at the stage it was. Any of you that have brothers and sisters, as children you can remember when you were in your room fighting at night probably, and your dad said, "Stop, or I'm coming in with the belt." That he meant business, yeah, probably, until you heard the knock at the door. And when the door ripped open and there was the 8-foot wide belt with meat cleavers on it and said, "I'm going to kill you," you knew you were friends again. You and your brother or sister were friends. And, "Hey, Dad, no problem." We are that way. Russian, Chinese, American, Canadian. We are the fighting siblings, all humans. Well, majority of us anyway. To get us together long enough to try peace, to get along in harmony, it was reasoned that they could not coerce us from any philosophical or political point. They could not force us with a dictatorship. So they were going to fool us into thinking we were being invaded, without knowing that we had aliens at the time. The best laid plans go astray. In 1947, there was a crash. And there were alien beings on that crash. Even though I wasn't there, I'm convinced from what I was shown inside the organization. Certainly there were some technologies, and probably still are some remaining, that we were not able to back engineer.
Sightings by Gemini, Apollo, and Skylab astronauts. The first sighting occurred during Gemini 4 in June of 1965. Astronaut Jim McDivitt suddenly spotted a cylindrical object with arms and antennae. And when seen against the day sky, it appeared white or silvery. The object then appeared to be moving toward the craft. Suddenly, they lost sight of it. During the sighting, the astronauts were able to take these photographs and movie films of the UFO. Gemini 5, later that year, after 3 days and 5 hours into their mission, were contacted by Houston Control Center, advising the astronauts that Houston had picked up and was tracking another object, which was pacing Gemini across the entire United States. They estimated the UFO between 2,000 to 10,000 yards from the craft, and as large as the Gemini craft itself. Because of the limitations of viewing area aboard their capsule, no visual contact was made. Radar continued to track the object until they passed the Ascension Islands in the Atlantic. It then disappeared. Gemini 10 crew, Collins and Young, picked up objects traveling together in orbit. A positive identification has to date not been made.
Tells us that we are dealing with beings who have anywhere from 1,000 to 1 million to 10 million to 1 billion years advancement in technology on us. So you've got to figure that look what happened in the last 100 years. We have the Wright brothers at the turn of the century taking off in basically a fabric and wood aircraft. In 1969 we have lunar expeditions. In the year 2004 we have massive airplanes being built out of alloys and graphite and this big ship that Airbus is building, the new Boeing plane. So in 100 years from fabric and wood we've come to, you know, advanced metallurgy, fuel use and propulsion in just 100 years. Imagine what a culture could accomplish in 1,000 years, or 10,000 years, or 1 million years, or 1 billion years. It's not inconceivable that you have intelligently manufactured and controlled machines that can not only traverse great distances in space by mastering gravity and the time-space continuum, but also the interdimensional travel that might be possible. Many theories now purport that there were not only 4 dimensions at the creation of the entire multiverse 14 billion years ago at the time of the Big Bang. There were 11, maybe as many as 21 dimensions. So some of these beings may be coming from an extra-dimensional place. I mean, and you know what it says is that these technologies have been harnessed, and that it's possible to use other fuels that don't rely just on simple combustion. And you know, there are many theories. I mean, some theories are that the military already knows about these forms of propulsion and lighter than air vehicles or metals that can be vibrated to a certain point where they become light waves, photons. But they're not telling us. They're not going to reveal that, obviously, to us, and we just have to keep the search going. So I think that you know, it's incumbent on us as a race on this planet to begin to find alternatives to the fossil fuels, but we're just not doing it fast enough.
It's probably been the greatest and most successful cover-up in the history of the world. UFOs are as real as the airplanes that fly over your head. That is my unequivocal conclusion.
Oh my God.
We've had a remarkable amount of patience, and your biggest tests are coming, because as more and more of this information comes out, more and more people are going to want to ask you, who they thought were crazy, what the hell's going on? They're going to want to know. And you're going to have to try, in a very calm manner, explain it to them, even though you yourselves are going to have all the butterflies. You're going to be wondering, how the hell am I going to even deal with this? Because you have some background information. Now, this ET component is really about us. It is our destiny to travel the stars. It is our destiny to continue to move out and colonize space, especially our own solar system. It is not our destiny to be killed by vaccines in war. You will have to make those choices. My choices are already made. Okay? My decisions are clear. I am the father of 5 children. There is no way I'm going to back down and I'm going to sell them into slavery. Never going to happen. Okay? You need to make your own choices. Okay. I once asked Phaseus, one of the Andromedans, who has since crossed over, what was to become of us? Some of this may be a review for some of you. What was to become of us? What was going to happen to our race, to our civilization? And he just looked at me and he said, this is how we see you. Responsible freedom of self-determination, becoming truly self-confident and free, to unconditionally be responsible for oneself without being coerced to accept some higher authority. In our galaxy, the more advanced the civilizations have become in the center of the galaxy, the riffraff had to start moving out to the outskirts of the galaxy. The riffraff. It's just like Star Wars. Okay? We are in the boonies, and that's why we have some riffraff here. We're not the only planetary race that is having problems with the riffraff. Okay? But what's unique about us is that genetically we are considered, to the Andromedan race, genetic royalty. And I have been saying this since day one. We are extremely unique. And it's because of that uniqueness we have enormous strength. We have enormous capacity for emotions. We have enormous intent and drive to not only to survive, but to create. What we lack is faith in ourselves.
What color were the lights? What shape was the craft? Where did it go? Where did it come from? And scientific equipment of every sort has been focused on the UFO phenomenon for 50 years. And many groups like MUFON and others claim that the scientific approach is the only approach we should use, and it's the only way we're going to get answers. And my friends, I can challenge every one of them, and I have to their faces, to tell me after 50 years of scientific investigation, have you learned who these creatures are, where they come from, or why they're here? Is there anyone who has learned this with the scientific approach that you know of? MUFON itself has not been able to give me one reply. I spoke at the MUFON International Symposium this summer, and I made the same challenge, and all I got was silence. Science is not going to penetrate this. It is not capable, as it is now, to penetrate what is going on, because this is above the three-dimensional scientific paradigm that science holds on to as if it were a holy crusade to not move past it. And we have to move past it if we're going to make any headway. The UFO community resisted the abduction reports more vigorously than anyone in the beginning. Did you know that? Yeah. Remember the first few reports? This can't be. Yes, people can see craft, but certainly they're not seeing anybody in them. They're obviously empty. There's nobody flying them. And if anyone claimed to have actually seen an alien or had an encounter, they were immediately written off by the UFO community as being crackpots and loonies. Nobody has encounters. They resisted vigorously. And then, pushed by evidence as case after case began to come forward, grumblingly, the UFO community said, okay, maybe there is somebody in those ships. Okay, maybe occasionally one of them might get out of the ship. Maybe every now and then some random witness might accidentally see one of these little creatures out taking soil samples or picking some flowers or gathering some water from the reservoir, but no, it's not a common event. Even Bud Hopkins, as recently as the early 1980s, was saying, All right, people may be getting abducted at some point, but it only happens once. It's that random and rare. There was no idea, even among the leading researcher in the field, that it was a recurrent situation. He would accept one report, but if the person said they came back, he'd say out of the office. Because that was where the research stood. It was conservative, it was resistant to change, and Bud is the first to admit he was pushed to change by the evidence, and he waited until it was overwhelming before he would change. There are some people who have been forced to change much faster, Miss Bartlett being one of these, because of living in the center of an invasion area during the mid-'80s when things changed, and we're going to talk about when things changed and why they changed.
And built by the German AEG company in 1944. The engine being called the Kohler converter. This engine was designed so that it needed a relatively small amount of energy to activate it. This energy coming from an accumulator or battery. After a short time, the Kohler converter built up sufficient energy transformed from the gravitational field of the Earth This is a diagram of the Kohler converter, and this is a photograph of the actual converter, operating on a principle of genius simplicity. This is a preliminary sketch of the Hanibu 2. The cockpit here is outlined in red. With a circular driving unit beneath, outlined in purple. With adjacent space for people or soldiers. This machine was built somewhat like a modern ship.
What it gave us was a concrete focus for all kinds of space research.
The scientific community felt strongly that the signal should not belong to anyone. And while they desperately needed better telescopes, most scientists wanted to avoid the politics of where the money came from, the US, the UN, or elsewhere. Finally, on the 13th of October 2001, Congress decided the matter with a huge reallocation of funds for extraterrestrial research.
The money came from three bodies: NASA, the military, and the National Science Foundation. And it amounted to about $20 billion each year for 10 years. What it covered was space exploration, manned and unmanned, a new telescope program, defense systems, and genetic engineering.
It was inevitable that genetic engineering would become a part of the new initiative. If human beings were ever going to travel across the galaxy, they would have to live beyond their natural lifespan. To achieve this, it would be necessary to create humans that had been biologically modified. At a secret conference in November 2001, a group representing a range of disciplines, science, the arts, religion, philosophy, and the military, debated the moral and pragmatic implications of making contact with aliens.
We need to make plans for lots of different strategies, defusing situations, protecting ourselves, as paranoid as it sounds.
It's a presumably cultured species of some sort. We've never found one before. We have never had the need to communicate with one before. And the goal is to find these people and communicate with them and find out something about their mode of intelligence and their mode of living their lives.
Like the media, they too began to speculate on the appearance of the aliens. But government officials knew their efforts to decode the extraterrestrial message would be wasted without new telescopes that could receive a much clearer signal.
They asked us what we wanted, and we said 73 100-meter telescopes, all grouped together, which is an extraordinary collecting area, and we got it. it was like Christmas. Prior to 1997 was only a few $1 million a year. It was just an extraordinary turnaround.
By the spring of 2002, the new telescope building program, which continues to this day, had begun. The European Union now also began construction of a telescope, as did Japan's massive Sekai Corporation. But these projects paled beside the US effort. And yet, across America, opposition was growing.
Pay enough tax as it is already just to keep the economy going. I just want to see some results.
You're listening to the Jack Bingley Show. Now, who's our next caller?
Radio stations reported a flood of calls, some supportive, but many angry about the high taxes needed to build telescopes.
See, what I wonder is how ordinary people are supposed to know.
Just how stupid do they think we are? There hasn't been one shred of hard evidence to prove that these aliens actually exist, you know? Yet, we're supposed to.
And the government knows it. If you want to know what the government is really up to, just look at history.
What they're saying is that this air spike gadget, which is out in front of this little ship, which is shaped kind of like a little pill, the little spike sticks out, and then there's a little sting on the end. When the sting's not in operation, they say you've got a conical shock wave, and when the sting is in operation, operating at something like 35 megawatts power, and it's a plasma arc torch on the end of the sting, that it creates a parabolic wave which reduces the pressure behind it and reduces the heat transfer problems that are associated with that kind of high velocity. But it's just a theory. It's been, they tested it in a wind tunnel, but they're not going to use it.
The second page of this, which shows the diagram, discusses for speeds above Mach 1, the vehicle would rely on a magneto-hydrodynamic fan engine. The lens-shaped craft would have an interior rectifying antenna to absorb pulsed, focused microwave power on the outside of the vehicle to ionize air forced to the rim of the craft by the air spike. The rectennas, which they like to call it, also would pulse electric power through the ionized air, and in conjunction with two superconducting magnets ringing the craft, accelerate the air aft past the vehicle. According to Mirabo, which is the scientist involved in this wonderful device, this drive system also tends to eliminate sonic booms. Gee, just like what, I wonder? By eliminating pressure discontinuities, so the vehicle is silent but very bright in hypersonic operation. So we have a lens-shaped, glowing object that is silent in flight that he's speculating that someday we might have.
Yes, and what's interesting is the technology's wrong for that kind of propulsion, and they're making it look like that this is just on the horizon. Only 40-something years after the one I saw that didn't make a sonic boom, did not have an air spike gadget on it, and went between 9,000, possibly 25,000 miles per hour in 3 seconds. Now, it did 2 90-degree turns at above 200 miles per hour, absolutely square turns.
Лиц. Сегодня мы можем предположить, что имел в виду гросс-адмирал. Не так давно в Антарктиде под километровым слоем льда обнаружены огромные озера. Температура воды в них плюс 18 градусов. Над поверхностью воды находятся куполообразные своды, заполненные теплым воздухом. Не исключено, что из этих озер, постоянно подогреваемых снизу, в океан вытекают настоящие реки теплой воды. За тысячи лет они могли создать подо льдом и под землей огромные туннели, вполне пригодные для устройства тайных баз. Со стороны океана, поднырнув под прибрежными льдами, туда может спокойно зайти любая подводная лодка. Вот вам и готовая база. Без штормов и полярных холодов. Абсолютно скрытая от постороннего глаза. Вне досягаемости для любого противника.
Если бы немцы решили разместить какие-то секретные базы создать или секретные зоны, которые как бы имели статус экстерриториальности, то полярные зоны, в том числе Антарктида, была совершенно естественным районом нахождения подобного рода баз или анклавов.
Судя по обнаруженным документам и воспоминаниям участников событий, нацисты на самом деле создавали в Антарктиде сверхсекретную базу. Она носила кодовое название «База 211». Уже с начала 1939 года между Антарктидой и Германией начинаются регулярные рейсы специально переоборудованного исследовательского судна «Швабия». На землю королевы Мод перевозится горнопроходческое оборудование и другая техника, в том числе рельсовые дороги, вагонетки и огромные фрезы для проходки тоннелей. Туда же прибывают ученые, инженеры, высококвалифицированные рабочие. Для чего Германии была нужна столь удаленная база? Предположения высказываются разные. Одни полагают, что с ее помощью немцы хотели контролировать южные моря. Другие считают, что Германию привлекали полезные ископаемые Антарктиды, особенно уран, без которого невозможно создание сверхоружия. А кто-то утверждает, что на случай проигрыша в войне в Антарктиде готовилось убежище для элиты Третьего Рейха. И что якобы уже с 1942 года в Новую Швабию началась переброска ее будущих жителей. Не только ученых и специалистов, но и представителей.
I had my Leica A camera with me, and suddenly I saw a flying saucer. It had no wings, absolutely none. I took a photo and wound on the film, but it was already directly over me. Then I took a second photo, and I could see it was a flying saucer.
Ed was devastated by what he felt was the theft of his saucer.
UFO, where did you go? Will you be back? I don't know. Twinkling, twinkling, flying high, like an ashtray in the sky.
Ed would get his own back later, but in the meantime, the Germans had a flying saucer.
It actually flew and flew pretty well.
This is what the German saucer looked like. It was based on the flying saucer principle, the effect discovered by Henry Coanda, whereby the ship created an area of low pressure above it and literally sucked itself into the air. But it combined this with other new technologies, such as the helicopter and the jet engine. It was fast, versatile, and could potentially carry a heavy payload of bombs underneath. But perhaps most important in a country which had lost so many runways to Allied bombing, it could take off vertically.
Because she never knows anything about this case.
Oh, she didn't know?
No.
When did she find out?
She says Billy takes a long time that her tell her something from the UFO.
And then how did you feel about it?
And she was thinking why this happened all to me. Billy shows her every time the picture that he takes, and so she was knowing about from the picture from the UFO. But she was very critical about this case and asked him some questions about all this case, and it was very difficult for Bobby.
Were there times when you had just had it up to here and you couldn't take any more?
She never was thinking to leaving this whole case, but she was crying and fighting against Billy and against the whole case.
At one point, Poppy admits, she was so fed up she burned half the photographs.
Today the feeling is other because she knows very well about the whole case and things about the Pleiadians, and this is very important for her.
Listen here.
And larger, then shrunk, collapsed, and then, like magic, it was gone. And best of all, it looked like a shower of sparks.
In all, over 30 other witnesses corroborate Maya's testimony. The contacts continue at a furious pace, sometimes 2 or 3 a week. Meyer claims to have had over 130 meetings. He has taken hundreds of photographs and has over 3,000 pages of notes.
For a long time, we've had an urge to contact someone who sincerely wants to be helpful in our mission. Here and there, we open such contacts with inhabitants of different worlds, but only when they have developed enough to become rational, thinking beings. Then we prepare them for the thought that they are not the only rational, thinking beings in the universe.
Britt questions Calliope, Maya's wife, whose nickname is Poppy.
Poppy, how long have you and Billy been married?
Now, 60 years.
And you were married in Greece?
Yes.
Uh-huh. What did you think when Billy first told you about these experiences?
Her English shaky, Poppy reverts to German.
Ja. Het was schwierig am Anfang gewesen.
It was difficult at the beginning.
Mm-hmm.
Wow, you recorded that here? My wife recorded this one here, and in the meantime, I've been there down very standingly with the other recorder.
You had another recorder down
Yes.
there. How high was the ship above you?
About 60 meters.
60 meters. How far would you estimate it is from here
Oh,
down there today?
I think some 300 meters.
The sounds bear no resemblance to anything Stevens has heard before. Maya gives him both tapes for analysis.
Military professors that used to be in war colleges and the like are training people like ex-Russian KGB and Spetsnaz people right here on American soil. I've seen it with my own two eyes, along with other people, other geologists. By the way, I'm still a geologist, still do geological survey work. However, I don't work for the government anymore. I took my security clearance and all my government stuff and cut it up and sent it back to the, pardon my French, SOBs. When I found out that a number of these 131 deep underground military bases are being used to subvert the Constitution.
These saucers worked in one sense almost like a helicopter in that they had rotating vanes. The vanes would rotate underneath the saucer and were powered by a jet, the same jet that moved the saucer forward, would be directed up to spinning these vanes to give it lift.
They were to be used as a bomber. Every machine built in those years was a war weapon. What was to be the final battle of the Third Reich?
According to Remercer, an increasingly desperate and deluded Hitler plotted to use his secret new weapons in a devastating attack on New York.
I was allowed 2 times to photograph at night. As we sat inside the car, we saw all of a sudden to the north, above the meadow, out of nowhere, a fire-red disc, about as large as a headlight.
And then what happened?
And then it suddenly disappeared. Then there was a short pause, after which, at the same place again, appeared all of a sudden a silvery white ball. Then there was another pause, and then the same ball appeared again. It flew toward us, got large